Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special podcast discussion. I'm your host, Richard Billy Jr., and today I'm joined by Mr. Jakejames Lugo. How's it going, Mr. Lugo?
I'm doing good, Rich. We got a couple interesting things to talk about. Usually, every time that me and you do these like one-on-one fireside chats, we usually talk about something bad. It's usually like something always terrible, but like at least we get some good food for thought for everybody out there. Hopefully, when they listen to these, so let us know in the comment section what's up. But I'm glad to be here. Hopefully, we're gonna have a fun chat about stuff.
Absolutely. And today's discussion is basically going to be about embargoes, content creators, and the gaming media. As you know, we've been experiencing quite a bit of things, a lot of changes that have happened over the last couple of years, even more so in the last couple of months. So we definitely wanted to talk about some of this stuff because it's always an issue to, basically to address. So, Mr. Lugo, how about you pretty much give everybody here an understanding of where this conversation came from?
So the reason why I wanted to do something like this, as far as talk about it, or at least, talk openly about it in podcast form or in show form with everybody here that tunes in and checks out our website, checks out our content stuff. By the way, thank you for the support for everything, everybody. The reason being is because there's been a couple stuff that's happened over the last month or so that I feel like is a product, not just of the shifting attitude and the shifting nature of the industry, because a lot of the stuff that's going on is moving away from traditional media in the way that it used to be done beforehand. And what I mean by that is not necessarily the individuals that are part of the industry. I mean, more so in the way that information and content is presented. Obviously, things are moving away from print form, moving away from written word, going more towards video. That's just the nature of the business, and that's fine. And there's more people getting into it. What I find that's a big problem, though, is when there's certain things that happen that kind of, shouldn't be happening and shouldn't be going down. And then they're kind of almost given excuses or passes about it. One of the biggest things that happened most recently was the embargo that was broken for Super Mario Odyssey, as well as also some of the stuff that went down for the Mario and Luigi Bowser's Minions game that got dumped practically after a Nintendo brand ambassador got a review unit of the game and basically ruined it for everybody else that has been working with Nintendo, trying to cover the games and stuff, making it more difficult and making the publisher a little bit more scrutinizing and more tougher on the way that they distribute games out. And it basically means that there's nothing wrong with the publisher scrutinizing who they give whatever copies to. That's within their right. That's always how it's been. But what makes it annoying is how everybody pretty much has to suffer from somebody that just, feels like, they're a little bit above the rules, at least having that attitude that they're above the rules, and then just goes about and just ends up breaking them and kind of like ruins like the entire point of like how certain things happen, being embargoes and stuff like that. And it's mostly been coming from content creators that I've noticed over the last like year or so where things have happened. We're going to get a little bit more into some of that other stuff, but I want to get your thoughts, Rich. I mean, you remember when this news came out? I mean, I was pissed off. You were a little bit pissed off about some stuff. I mean, it was pretty annoying, right?
Yeah, it's very annoying. We've seen quite a bit of things that have happened so far this year regarding a lot of the bigger titles. I know, just to stay on Mario for a second, with Mario Odyssey, I know that we had requested that game a while back, and I was told that here we are, we're recording this show Thursday. I believe it's November 2nd. The game has been out for about a week. We still haven't received a review copy, and from what I understand, we may not get a review copy. It's still to be determined. But pretty much what happened with all these other issues, very much connected, even though it's not very made clear that that's what the issue is. But yeah, people breaking the embargoes is a unfortunate thing. I know that with Destiny 2, when you went to a Destiny 2 event earlier this year.
That was blatant. And the funny part about that specifically was that I know Paris from Gamertag Radio was there, and a bunch of other outlets were there, like Polygon, Kotaku, IGN, etc. We were all there, and I was having the same type of conversation with the PR for Bungie and also Activision there about the exact same thing. And then literally the next day, a bunch of stuff that we weren't supposed to talk about at that time ended up just getting dumped out there. And here's the thing, and going back to Mario Odyssey, it's not about not receiving the review units or not receiving the review copies from the publisher. Again, that's part of the industry, that's part of the business, that's part of the game. That's not us throwing shade or taking a shot at the publisher or Nintendo or whoever else like that. What is the problem, what the focal point of this discussion and the issue is when people that get that privilege or get that advantage or get that access to a lot of these products, whether it's review copies or just going places and stuff, and they end up abusing it. That's the problem. That's the central problem. And that's really been stemming from really the content creation community, the people that consider themselves or are looked at as non-traditional media, non-traditional gaming media, if you want to call it, the people that are going out and making YouTube channels and just making content like that, or being Twitch streamers and just making content like that. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that process. There's many paths to the top of the mountain. And if anything, that's a great thing for everybody in the industry, especially if you want to work together. The problem is, though, is when you have individuals that are there and they take advantage of that privilege, and it ruins it for everybody else. It makes it not only harder on everybody else, but it puts a bad taste in other people's mouths when they're clearly trying to work hard, trying to follow the rules, trying to really put out there and really work hard to get that type of privilege and never get it because of stuff like this.
Absolutely. And a few points that I wanted to make real quick. I'm glad that you mentioned that it's not about the review copy. We already know we are a smaller publication, so we are not going to get every review copy. What I think the issue is that, you know, as you mentioned, there are some people that do get copies early. They do abuse the privilege. But what I have noticed is that a lot of these people that do get this stuff early is that they abuse the privilege, so on and so forth, but the publishers are still sending them games. So I think that it's an issue where the publishers themselves and the companies in charge, they have to really take a hard look at who they're sending copies to, and try to come up with a system as to, for those that, you know, don't ever break embargoes, maybe we should give them an opportunity to continue covering the games. But that's something that they have to fix internally.
Yeah.
One other point I wanted to make also is that this does extend to not just video games, but entertainment, because, you know, for most of this year, Gary Swaby, Dana, and myself, we've been covering the Power TV show. And there was an issue with that show as well, because normally we would get an episode early, a week ahead of time, to basically watch it and then do a review for it. But there was someone that pretty much had got access to that press site, and they decided to, not only did they decide to watch the remaining episodes of the season, but they also decided to tape that footage and then put the video on Facebook to basically spoil all of the rest of the season for everybody.
You see, that's foul. That's like super foul. And I can relate that to something that we talked about behind the scenes a while back when news came out about it, where some people for the Nintendo Brand Ambassadors program, and I know we're picking on Nintendo a little bit, but like this has been put out in the news. We don't hate Nintendo. I'm just gonna put it out there. We love the people that work over at Golan, and we love the people that work over at Nintendo. That being, for all those headaches that we go through with any other publisher like that, at least we still work with them. We're still professional enough to at least, you know, come together, compromise, and do stuff that's cool. But here's the reason why we keep bringing them up, and you'll know in just a second how I relate that to stuff that's happened in gaming. I remember a while back when some of the Nintendo brand ambassadors, including something that happened more recently, where the Mario Luigi Bowser's Minion story kind of got leaked out. The ROM, somebody that was for part of their brand ambassador program, got the game early, like, you know, got sent out the game for review and for content and stuff, and they just took it and just dumped the entire game on the internet. Literally pirated the game on the internet. And then before that, even there was other people, some of which I've met personally, like cross paths, which are like various events, or like E3 and stuff, that would get some of these games early and end up trying to sell them for profit to other content creators, which I never understood, because not only is that illegal, like highly illegal, like they were trying to make a couple $100, if not close to over $1,000 on an early copy of a game that people could just make videos of and get like all those views and such. But like, not only is that super illegal, it takes advantage of that access that you're given and that trust you're given from the publisher, in this case being Nintendo, like that. And people really work their butts off for that type of access. Like being able to work with Nintendo in that regard, where you get games from them in order to review or make videos about or just talk about it, that's not easy. That's definitely, a lot of people look at that, especially when it comes to the traditional gaming media, is like, oh, that's like an expected thing. Like you're always going to get that. That's why you don't pay for games and stuff. No, it's not easy to get something like that, especially with a company like Nintendo, which, to peer behind the current a little bit, it's very fickle and very stubborn sometimes, but at least it's part of the process. It's part of, you know, the ability to at least, you know, be able to be professional and put out content like that professionally, as a website, as an outlet, as an individual, as a media person, etc. But it just really disheartens me when I see that, or when I hear news about it, especially from people that I've known in the industry that go about it and take advantage of that and do something so foul like that. And then what really gets to me, and I want to know your thoughts on this, Rich, when there's like a lot of excuses, it seems like, or a lot of pacifying, attitudes when stuff like that happens. Like, it's almost okay to do that. Like, nobody bats an eye, let alone the publisher, which I think that now some of them, including Nintendo, have been getting a little bit more savvy about like cracking down on stuff like that, deservedly and understandably so. But like, then you have people on the outside, or even people that are on the outside looking in, that are probably following individuals or outlets on social media and are like, just giving them a pass. And I don't think that's right. I think that's wrong. And I think that's just, a means for them just to get a leg over everybody else and get that 15 minutes of fame, when it's just pretty much foul no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think that they definitely need to take the time to evaluate the people who they are giving these copies to. For those that get the game early, and are also breaking the embargoes that they see in the paperwork, we can't do this.
Yeah, it's like right in front of you. That's the thing I don't understand. That happened to me at the Destiny event. And granted, it came from multiple places, because one of the places it came from was Polygon, where they forgot to take out some stuff from their footage. And that happens. That happens all the time for various reasons, one or another. I think people make it too much more of a bigger deal when it comes from a bigger outlet, which we'll get into in just a bit about that attitude about stuff like that. But there'll be some people that'll get flown out to events, or some outlets that'll get flown out to events and given that access, put up for hotels and all this other stuff. And all the publisher asks you to do is like, listen, don't talk about certain things, or don't reveal things before the certain date, because you're getting that front row access to all this stuff for your content, and then just blatantly just ignore that. That was the conversation I was having with PR a couple of times. It's like, I'm not giving them excuses for them doing their job. That's just the way it is, and they have to deal with that. But it really makes you shake your head when people are just have that type of attitude, or that condescending type of attitude, because of either their following, which I think it comes from. It comes more from content creators, where they garner a large following, and because they feel like they could get away with stuff. I think it's wrong. I think that's like terrible, because they just don't come from a genuine place with that regard.
I agree. And one thing I did want to make sure that I did mention now, this conversation is specific to those that actually have a relationship with the publishers and get the games early. I know that there are some people where they don't necessarily get early review copies, but there are certain mom and pop shops that they pick up games at, and pretty much get access to some stuff early. So I'm not.
Yeah, that's a totally different issue.
Yeah, I'm not talking about those people. We're talking specifically about the people that have these working relationships with these companies and still abuse these policies. One other thing I did want to add real quick, to go back to what happened with the whole Stars situation. After that guy had leaked all the episodes, pretty much after that, Stars just shut down all of the rest of the assets for everyone else. So in other words, no other site or any other publication had access to those episodes. They had to watch the show when it actually aired on television. And we spoke about that extensively when we had a separate video about that. But yeah, in the case of with the gaming stuff,
Nintendo's doing that now. They did that ever since that happened with Mario and Luigi Bowser's Minions. Number one, they were really cracking down. There was an article, I believe, on US Gamer or GameBiz.net, where they talked about that. Nintendo, according to a couple sources that they had, were really like, you know what, we're just cracking down on everybody. And because of that, in our case, from our perspective, we didn't get Mario Odyssey, we didn't get Fire Emblem. There's a possibility that we might not even get Pokemon, which, we've been planning for a while to cover these games in some regard, not just reviews, but also to talk about them on like various places like the Co-op podcast and stuff like that. And it affects places and outlets like us, as well as everybody else, because somebody just wanted to get that 15 minutes of fame, or just wanted to get that extra boost to stay in the limelight like that by violating the rules, or just going around and bending or breaking the rules. And that sucks, because not only is it not take into account like the ramifications of doing stuff like that, which in most cases is illegal, especially when you're dumping the game, when you're getting into piracy stuff. That's a whole another crazy argument and stuff. But to relate it to your Stars things, like now the publisher is shutting down on everybody. Like now it makes it more difficult to cover their games, when literally the majority of people, us included, never once broke the rules like that. So why we feel like we have to be punished for something like that? It really sucks. And again, totally within their right at the publisher, in this case Nintendo, or Stars in your example, for them to do that. Understandably so. I mean, they got to get control of what's going out there, especially when they're trying to at least work with everybody like that. But it does suck from our perspective.
Absolutely. And yeah, as you said, I agree that they have to try and get control of the situation. So that's understood. But I like I said, I hope that the main lesson that all of these companies learn from this is, you have to really take a look at the sites that are actually doing a good job with the coverage and are not breaking any embargoes. And those are the sites that, you should consider thinking about the next time when you're deciding to send stuff out too, because you already know if you've known these people for years. Like, this site has been around. Next year is going to be our 10-year anniversary.
We're
So
hitting
we've
that
been around.
dime. We're hitting that dime year.
Yeah, so we've been around for a long time. A lot of people that we have known at certain companies, some have moved on, they've gone on to other companies, but they always remember the website. And for that reason, I like to think we do have some good relationships. So in some cases, we will get some games. Other times, it may take a while. We'll eventually get them, or we won't get them. But I'm just hoping that as a result of all this stuff that's happened with these embargoes breaking, that these companies are going to take a little bit of a harder look at the people who aren't doing this stuff, and just remember that still give them the opportunities, but they definitely need to punish those that are abusing the privilege that they're given.
Yeah, sometimes I don't think it's enough, and again, the examples I've given, like just selling the game to other creators for profit, that again, that's illegal. And that should be an automatic blacklist, let alone giving the game out when you're not supposed to do. That's in Nintendo's case, that's what you get in the embargo details, whether you're a brand ambassador or just a media person or not. But to relate to all of that, which I think is a great segue in all this, it's the attitude that we get from both sides of the equation. Okay, forgetting about the publisher, forgetting about review copies, forgetting about embargoes for a second. All right, let's talk a little bit about content creators. Let's talk about quote unquote traditional media, or just games media, as like what a lot of people call it. There's this attitude that's there, or this divide and this disdain for the gaming media as a whole, which I've seen grown over the last few years. I would literally, not too long ago, you remember this when I posted up, I was talking with Colin Moriarty when I had the interview with him not too long ago, and we were talking about the same thing. Now, in his defense and his perspective, he has a little bit more of a unique outlook on it, because his situation and his experience with some of this stuff is a little bit different than most, if not everybody else, because a lot of it had to deal with politics, a lot of it had to do with other aspects of the gaming media as a whole. But as speaking from my personal experience and speaking from a perspective, being part of the outlet that, again, you mentioned we've been around for almost 10 years now at this point. As for now, even though I haven't been with you guys as that long, but the outlet's been around for almost 10 years. There's this attitude towards those that identify as like traditional gaming media or want to be gaming media, in more traditional sense. There's this real hatred or this real anger towards them, for one reason or another. A lot of it comes and stems, like I've mentioned plenty of times before, stems from a lot of stuff that people called Gamergate. A lot of it stems also from people being really ride or die for their favorite creators on different platforms like YouTube, like Twitch and stuff, because they feel like they're getting more of a real feedback or real type of content from them. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the attitude and the animosity from one side to the other, I think, is a big problem. And I've experienced that. I mean, before I get into my own experience and stuff, I mean, give me your thoughts, Rich, because I've noticed this grow like exponentially over the last couple of years. And I've talked about it with you even off camera a couple times.
Oh, absolutely. And you'll have to definitely let everybody know about the Destiny 2 experience that you've encountered. But yeah, this is an issue that, last year, I know it's been going on for a while. I didn't really get a chance to really get an idea of this until I went to E3 this year and a lot of the events that I went to this year. And I could tell the people that were there for YouTube or content creators and the people that were there as journalists. And I do think a lot of the stuff that happened with Gamergate, unfortunately, that did give some people a negative view. But I would think that, a lot of people who do have a mind and are able to think for themselves are able to distinguish those that are actually in this industry and want to cover stuff because they care about the industry, because they care about video games, and they are informed on some stuff. I would like to hope that they will not think every single person that does gaming journalism is the same.
Well, here's the problem. That this is the big problem, and it comes from, I don't think it's necessarily kind of one side better than the other type of thing. If anything, I believe that people that are content creators, people that are on YouTube on the grind, doing their thing, making their brands and building up their audiences and stuff, should be able to work with just about anybody. Just in the same thing on the flip side of this. This is the attitude I've always had with my own content, even working here on the Koalition and even having my own YouTube channel, even when I was streaming, I have the ability and I have the will and the desire to work with just about everybody. And I think more people need that type of mentality. Where I think it becomes a problem, though, is when there's this bandwagon ideology or this bandwagon mentality where it's the fad or the in thing now to take a shot up or take a shot at either a bigger outlet or people that they feel like, you know, is the establishment or whatever. There seems to be a lot of that rhetoric and a lot of those words thrown around here and there, especially now that we're in such a politically charged environment where it's okay to do that. And there's like excuses being done. The perfect example of this, obviously, that happened not too long ago is the stuff that's gone on with PewDiePie. That I feel like it was a huge factor of that more recently. The stuff that went on with JonTron and a few other content creators out there that have like ridiculous followings and stuff. You know, these people or these places have fans and have fan bases that are real rabid, that you know, they're ride or die with them. There's nothing wrong with that. What I do have a problem with, though, is when, you know, if we're talking about strictly gaming or the gaming industry as a whole, where there's this idea that, oh, being a games journalist, being part of an outlet, being part of the gaming community, you know, outside of just the YouTube gaming community is a terrible thing or a derogatory thing. And here's my perfect example that I mentioned earlier. Not so much about the Destiny event stuff. The only thing that happened really at the Destiny event that I mentioned and talked with you before was that, you know, there was other channels and content creators that went there besides like traditional games media outlets like Polygon, IGN, Kotaku, Rock Paper Shotgun, and all these other places. I don't have a problem with that. That's fine. I think that maybe sometimes people tend to be a little bit more bullish in the way that they kind of almost brag about being there. I think there's a culture to that I'm not really down with. But here's my problem, though, with how this has all played out over the last few years. Not too long ago, I got into a little spat with someone over Twitter where it was over something really stupid, over a super argument where I felt like, you know, I wasn't in the wrong. I felt like the other person was a little bit more bullish and a little bit much more disrespectful in the way that they presented how they were coming off. And, you know, when you're disrespected on Twitter, you clap back, obviously, or at least you try to, at least in the most best way that you can, because sometimes people are just rude on social media. That's just the nature of the internet sometimes. But where it really kind of went in like a really weird turn was when the person started, you know, going off on Twitter and started attacking me personally because I was a games journalist. Because I'm more proud about being a games journalist and doing what I do and posting up content online. And I call myself a games journalist. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Just as like I don't begrudge anybody for saying that they're a content creator, for saying that they're a streamer, that they're a YouTuber or a vlogger, whatever else that you want to say that your profession or whatever your discipline is. There's just nothing wrong with that. What I do think is a problem, though, and what I've seen over the last few years is people coming out and attacking people that say that they're games journalists just for simply being games journalists. That I think is wrong. I think that's terrible. That's almost discriminatory in a way in our industry, because immediately there's all these preconceived notions based on what other people have heard through word of mouth or through the news. You know, you could get mad at Polygon for writing whatever outlet or whatever article that they're going to put out there for someone giving their opinion. And everybody can have their opinion and stuff, but don't hate on everybody else because of that one article. Like, that's the thing I don't understand, and that's the thing I don't get, especially in my experience with my own little back and forth on Twitter. What does me being a gaming journalist have to do to speak to my character? That's the question that I put out there. What really shocked me and what really, you know, made me shake my head was a bunch of people agreeing with that, being okay with that, saying like, oh, because he's a games journalist, oh, immediately he can't take criticism. Oh, immediately he's pompous. He's got an attitude. He's an asshole, and all these other things like that. And I was like, where does everybody get this from? And where does everybody immediately jump to this? You know, especially in gaming, and you know, because the game industry, sometimes we tend to be in our own little bubble, you know, amongst, you know, the gaming fans, the consumers, the people that are constantly active on social media, that vocal minority. But I don't understand where that comes from sometimes. Like, I mean, give me some thoughts, Rich. Like, am I alone in this? Like,
oh no, I think a lot of this. I mean, I don't want to say that a lot of this type of behavior is all based on things that have been happening over the last couple of years. But I think what it should stem from is, you know, I think people need to understand that everyone has a right to their own opinion. And they should be treated as such. That, you know, if you don't like a certain game, or if you do like a certain game, you're entitled to have that opinion no matter what anyone else thinks. And to know that, I mean, again, if you go back to the Gamergate thing, we already know that controversy that was very interesting thing to have to deal with, because a lot of people, it made it about a lot of other things outside of what it actually was about.
And when it really wasn't anything that was like, you know, what a lot of people said about, like, I don't believe that Gamergate was ever about ethics and journalism. I think it was just blown up into that. Like when I went to Miami-Dade College not too long ago, people had asked me about that. You know, they asked me about controversies and stuff. And I told them what, back then, and I'll say it now, the majority of people that work in the gaming industry don't want to get involved with controversy like that. It's usually stems from either outside on social media, from fans that just blow certain things out of proportion, and then it just catches fire through word of mouth for one reason or another, and people just constantly throw fuel on top of it, which I think is ridiculous. Like, again, I go back to this thing where I see this attitude from a lot of new content creators and a lot of new streamers and YouTubers and stuff, whereas there's this animosity towards gaming websites, towards gaming journalists. It even happened to me recently based off that one example I gave, you know, with the spat stuff over Twitter, where, you know, trying to work with different individuals, you know, on podcasts or invite people to guest on podcasts, like on some of our shows, I've tried to invite various different YouTubers and vloggers and streamers onto our shows to kind of work together and actually, you know, build up content, have those fun discussions. And there's this just condescending attitude that you get that, personally, for me, I have no idea why it really kind of stems that way. I really don't understand, like, the real kind of, like, you know, for all intents and purposes, the best way to put it is a crappy attitude. Like, there's a perfect example, right? Another example that I was really putting out there, and I've talked about this with you personally. I think I maybe spoken about it once publicly, but I never really talked about it in detail, and this is the perfect time to do so. One time, I was actually trying to get a guy named Triforce onto the show, onto one of our podcasts, as well as also to one of my other podcasts that I do on YouTube. And as opposed to, you know, just saying, hey, don't have time, don't have the ability to do so, immediately, because he felt that he was whoever he was, starts throwing his accomplishments in my face. Like, literally just starts throwing that he has a Guinness World Record, that he does all this stuff. He has so many subscribers on YouTube. This is the type of stuff that you can't make up, that people talk about, that it's bad to do amongst other content creators, that literally happened right in front of me. It's amazing to me how that stuff is still around, that people only talk about and they say they don't want to do it, but yet you still have those individuals that do. And it's just weird to me where, you know, both sides of the equation, whether you're traditional gaming media or whether you're new gaming media or just new media in general, there's no compromise, there's no cooperation, there's no working together to create dope content. That's always been my mentality. Why don't people have the more willingness to collaborate amongst each other? There's some that do, and I get it. I think it's great, and I think it's awesome. But then you have that attitude that just muddies everything up, and I see that, and I get thrown that my way, or I experience that, or I see others go through that, and it makes me shake my head. It's like, this is the type of stuff, you know, for gaming as a whole, as an industry, of why we're always looked down upon by other industries, because you never hear about stuff like this as much from, like, the movie industry. You never hear about stuff like this a lot in the music industry. And that one has a lot of drama that you hear on, like, radio and stuff like that. I mean, I'm pretty sure you listen to Hot 97, you listen to, like, The Breakfast Club and stuff like that, that they're always talking about something crazy, but, like, you never really get this type of stuff, that what I've seen in the gaming industry, as much in those other industries. It's just, it almost feels like it's unique to us. And it's just weird to me. And it feels like it doesn't need to be there, but people just let it linger, or just let those type of attitudes linger.
That's true. No, you're right about that. I pretty much agree that, you know, the idea of people collaborating and doing stuff because of the love for video games, that is something we need a lot more of. I do know that there are a lot of people out there, though, that they look upon themselves as, well, I have become successful in this field. I've accomplished so much, I don't feel like I want to or need to work with anybody else.
It becomes rude almost. It becomes, like, really rude. Like, Colin Moriarty was telling me about this, where that guy, at least in my eyes, and I'm pretty sure yours as well, Rich, he's done a lot over the last, like, 10 years that he's been part of the industry. I mean, besides working at IGN, probably arguably the biggest outlet in our industry right now, he co-founded Kind of Funny, which is probably one of the biggest content creation / Patreon companies that have been around over the last couple of years. It's like huge. That has garnered a rabid following, and he doesn't even act like that from the type of attitude that I get from other places around the internet or around our industry. And I just think it's weird how that's okay for a lot of people. Like, that's acceptable. And I don't think it should be. It doesn't matter what walk of life or what avenue you come from or where you're at and what position you're at in this industry. There should always be, you know, that will to work with each other. Because, again, in essence, we're still a small industry compared to everybody else. It's just that I feel like a lot of it stems from all this me mentality, or this mentality is like, oh, you know, this pompousness, or that you get caught up on your own hype type of deal that I see from a lot of creators that I feel like ruins it. That just makes almost kind of adds more fuel to that fire of disdain between both old and new media. Like, this is one of the reasons why I see, besides the attitudes and stuff, why a lot of other journalists from bigger websites don't always work with other content creators like that. And it has nothing to do that they dislike each other. It's just like, yo, they don't want to deal with that type of attitude. They don't want to deal with the type of nonsense that happens with it out there. I mean, I always said, going back to the example that I did about PewDiePie is one of the biggest YouTube channels out there on the platform. 57 million subscribers. You cannot, you know, deny that. You know, he's done a lot for gaming as far as like the exposure of like doing Let's Plays for a lot of people out there. But I mean, when you really think about it and stuff, that attitude about all of a sudden getting into the anti-Semitism stuff, getting into the other N-word stuff during a game of PUBG, you know, not only does it really give our industry a bad look, you know, or give the whole scene a bad look like that, but who really wants to deal with something like that? Or thinks that that's acceptable, and immediately when you have an opinion about that, immediately you're the one with the problem, rather than the person that did something so terrible. It's like, it just doesn't make sense to me, and people give excuses for that.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. There's just a ton of things going on. Not really sure why. I'll be hopeful that some of this stuff will change, but I don't really know about that. I mean, again, you know, nowadays there are a lot of people that are already split on a lot of other topics, so it may be harder for them to come together. But I would hope, though, as far as the gaming industry is concerned, that people will consider trying to come together to at least, you know, put the focus on the developers and what they're doing, all of the great work that they're creating, not make it about the drama and all the other stuff.
Yeah, the animosity's got to go. The animosity really has to go, because it's just, it feels so unneeded and unnecessary almost all the time. It's just like, why are you going to attack other individuals for having an opinion about something? Or at least for one reason or another, just because of their profession. Like, immediately you're going to question their character. Like that, which I can understand. Some people do some foul stuff that I've seen online, some really foul stuff, and it is what it is. And you know, you could have an opinion about it, and that's fine. But I don't think that when you have a difference in opinions about like gaming, or when you have a difference in opinions about other stuff, and especially when you haven't been attacked or haven't been taken a shot at, you know, immediately I see from a lot of people or content creators towards other outlets, you know, you're going to question their character based on them being a games journalist, or based on the outlet that they work for, or you're going to paint a broad brush amongst a giant group of people for the actions of one individual. Like, that's the stuff I don't understand. That's the stuff I'm not down with. I don't think it's right.
Oh no, it's definitely not right. Absolutely not right. Yeah, I mean, but I feel like that is an issue. One of the bigger issues we have now, with people just not really valuing other people's opinions, being mindful of them. It's okay if you disagree, but don't think them and anyone they're associated with has that same opinion. Just leave it as is.
You know what we also got to do too, or at least what I want to see more of, and give me your thoughts about this. A lot of people have these preconceived notions based on audience, about audience size, whether it's subscriber size, whether it's views and stuff, where a lot of that stuff is given a pass, but also people limit themselves with who they work with over time. Now, don't get me wrong. When you got a couple million subscribers out there, everybody wants to work with you. But I think as opposed to really kind of cutting people off based on their own followings like that, which is what I see all the time, and I think it's wrong. I think people need to look at the quality and the content of the work, and the content of like what they present, because it's happened in the music industry plenty of times. And I keep going back to the music industry because that's the best parallel that I could see with what we go through and what we experience in the gaming industry, where new artists are really discovered by people that are already established, and new artists are really kind of given their shot at, like, thrust into the spotlight, when really either new artists or old artists, or like, you know, established people or individuals in the industry already really look at the content of the quality of the work and the character that's put out there. And I don't feel like we get a lot of that in the gaming industry. I feel like usually the people that are on top, that have, again, in the content creation realm and the YouTuber, the streamer realm, they only work with a select small group of people because they're all within that same range of following that follows them around, of following that, like, you know, subscribers, commenters, and all this other stuff, you know, followers on Twitter, and, you know, the social media following like that. They limit themselves to just that, as opposed to being a little bit much more broader, whether it's breaking off into other industries to work together to kind of better the perception of the gaming industry, you know, and I don't mean just going on like Jimmy Fallon, because I think it was, what was it, PewDiePie went on Jimmy Fallon one time or something like that. Something random like that. He went on the Late Show or something. But like, you know, beyond that, you know, beyond stuff like that, and also working with other what is it, streamers and other other creators, you know, both on the old media side and the new media side, to really kind of thrive more a little bit in the industry, to kind of put more people out there as opposed to just stick it to that one note and done type of deal.
Oh no, I agree 100% with that. I would also say that trickles down to the publishers as well, and them basically making their decision ahead of time who to choose to give opportunities to.
I agree. I think that's a big problem, and not just for the biggest publishers out there. There's some small publishers that we've tried to work with that have been like that. You know, again, we're not going to put their business out there, but like, you know, it's happened to us in the past, and it's not just limited to just one facet of the industry. It happens all over the place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As you said, we're not going to put anybody on blast. That's not what this is about. But yeah, it does happen frequently, and I know that that could be very discouraging for some. You know, especially if you put out great content. If you have a particular game you've been covering, you've had interviews, you've done all this other type of stuff, previews, and then to still not be given the opportunity to review the game, so on and so forth. But man, all of that stuff, yeah, it happens regularly. But again, I think that all goes back to them making the decisions on who they actually want to cover their stuff. And when you have stuff where you decide to send your material to someone and they decide to break an embargo, hey, listen, this is someone who you decided you wanted to work with. So
that, you know where that comes from? That's making decisions based on numbers. That's making decisions based on the large following, not the quality of the content or the quality or at least, you know, the quality of the character and what they're presenting, what they bring to the table. Because I've seen, and again, this is not throwing shade at anybody, and I want to make it very clear to everybody listening to this, because immediately somebody that's a fan of a content creator or a YouTuber out there is going to listen to something like this, and immediately that we're taking shots at them. It's not the case. I've seen instances where literally it's just videos of people almost like bragging about the fact that they got the access and about that they're able to do certain things and play certain games, rather than just putting the focus on the game and really putting it out there and really trying to inform people. That's a problem that I see almost daily in our industry. And even I see others that are like much smaller and that don't get the opportunities like that really bring a lot more to the table as far as like putting the games out there or putting the ideas and the food for thought out there, and they just don't get the shine that they deserve.
I agree. It's very unfortunate. Like I said, you know, I would hope that there will be some things that do change as a result of all the stuff that's going on now. But I mean, I have to believe it when I see it. A lot of these publishers we know we've dealt with before quite a bit of times. And for the most part, a lot of them we work with, cooperate, we don't have any issues with, but then there are some other ones that there's always something going on with them. Again, I'm not going to put any on blast. That's not what this video is about.
Yeah, it's not about complaining. Okay, again, that's immediately to dismiss this whole entire podcast. Somebody will come and be like, "Oh, you guys are just complaining because you guys don't get a lot of games, you don't get invited to events." No, it's not about that. It's about really putting out great stuff into the industry and really caring about the industry to see it grow and thrive and be better. Because the way that it's better is if we get a lot more better people out there really doing a lot of good stuff and getting a little bit more opportunities in order to make stuff that's awesome and really not break the rules and ruin it for everybody else. That's really where a lot of that stems from. And it's just, again, based on all the new stuff that's happened over the last few months, the attitudes that have been growing and kind of like been on the rise over the last few years, that's stuff that needs to change. I don't think we should be getting so caught up on like the craziness of like, oh, you know, there was this shocking trailer at Paris Games Week because again, Paris Games Week just happened not so long ago with the stuff with The Last of Us too, and Detroit Becoming Human. We should stop like really losing ourselves over stuff like that and really start talking about other systemic issues like this.
I agree. But, you know, since you mentioned that, I did want to make a comment on that. You know, I'm not going to say a lot for it. I'll save a lot of thoughts as far as what I really think about everything for the co-op this weekend. So make sure you check out that show. But I'll just say this regarding that trailer. I personally, you know, anyone who has ever played The Last of Us, you already know what kind of game this is. So I was not fazed by anything that I saw in the trailer. I think it's interesting that there was some that were offended, or that is their opinion. I respect it, but this is a game that is created by adults for adults, so I don't see anything wrong with anything that they've shown in the trailer. I'm just looking forward to learning more about the game.
That comes from an inconsistency of just the outlook that gaming and the gaming industry has sometimes, because you never get that from movies or from music. You don't get those type of questions where the violence is really pulled into question so heavily when it comes to marketing out the product like that. I've only really seen that in the gaming industry where that's been called into question, and not just now these days, but even back when the ESRB was created, when Mortal Kombat was around, when Splatterhouse was around. I just saw a video from Did You Know Gaming about Splatterhouse, and they brought up that same point. The issues are still there, and I feel like that hasn't changed. And again, it's an inconsistent outlook on the gaming industry as a whole, but that's neither here nor there.
I agree. Yeah. I don't know. We are definitely going to talk about that on Co-op, the trailers we did see, because I thought that the show was great. It's a little short, but what we saw was, and I don't have any issues with what we saw as far as that trailer in particular, but yeah, I like I said, just hopeful that there will be some changes in the industry for the better. Again, the embargo situation, I don't expect that to get fixed anytime soon. I think the people are going to continue to break embargoes because this stuff happens.
It's going to take time. All of that stuff is going to take time, especially attitudes towards gaming media or games journalists and stuff. That's going to take time, and it's going to take time and individuals that end up garnering those large followings to set a better example for people, because there's a lot of bad examples for a lot, of impressionable young kids or impressionable people that want to get into the industry or just want to look into it, as fans. There's a lot of bad examples out there that are just loud. And I feel like there's better examples that sometimes aren't as loud as them or just get overshadowed by all these other things going on that don't get the food for thought or get the ideas that are great presented to everybody that there needs to be.
Absolutely. Agree 100% with that. So any other thoughts that you think we should address before we get ready to wrap up this podcast?
No, I think we're good. I think we covered it really. And again, the reason why I wanted to have this discussion is because it's been growing and been in the works for a while. And I feel like it's this type of stuff that here and there, it's good to talk about because it's stuff that happens out there. And I feel like if we don't talk about it, if we don't address it, if we don't take a look at this type of stuff, then it'll never change and it'll never get better. I mean, at least for me personally, you've known this from conversations I've had with you off camera, as well as other people. I always hope at least the content I present and the content type of stuff that I'm involved with and the energy that I put out there is for the benefit of the industry, at least for the good of the industry, for the good of people out there, to at least set a better example where I feel like a better example needs to be set. And done so through my own actions, not just with me, also with you, also with everybody else on the website, on the Koalition, other people that I've come across in the industry that I've worked with that are good, great people that do great content. There are people out there that don't get caught up in the craziness and the nonsense which we were speaking about just now. So hopefully at some point we start to see a better shift here and there.
Absolutely. And for those that continue to view our content, whether it's on YouTube or on the website, we greatly appreciate all of the support. As I said, we try to keep it real and honest with these discussions. So hopefully you guys get something out of this discussion.
Definitely.
You get a deeper sense into what's going on with the industry from our point of view. So, but I believe that's pretty much it for this particular discussion. I don't know if you had any final shout outs that you would like to give, Mr. Lugo.
Yeah, I'll give a couple shout outs, with some stuff that's happened recently. Obviously, shout out to everybody watching this, whether you're watching it on YouTube or you're watching it on the website. We really appreciate it. We really appreciate your guys' support and your patronage. Obviously, all the patron supporters as well. Thank you. Again, your guys' support allows us to keep doing some more awesome stuff. I also want to give a couple special shout outs to a few entities, a few individuals. I want to give a shout out to Colin Moriarty for doing the one-on-one chat with me not too long ago for TK Spotlight. Really awesome. A lot of you guys seem to really like that discussion. I'm hopefully going to get some more awesome guests on the show. Again, it's on iTunes. If you guys haven't already seen it, definitely check out the show on iTunes and podcast form. Make sure you guys rate it and you subscribe to the TK Spotlight show on iTunes. That way it could get even better, get more exposure so more people could see the other cool discussions we've had on there. Big shout out to everybody at Make Games Miami for allowing me to go over there and speak at Miami-Dade College not too long ago, where we talked about some of this stuff which we spoke on in this podcast discussion. Really appreciate it. It was pretty awesome. hanging out over there, talking to game devs in the makings. Hopefully that future generation of game developers and indie game designers and all that will be able to at least help perpetuate and spread around some of those good ideas and some of those great ideas of which we've spoken on now. That'll be pretty awesome because, again, they're the future of our industry in some form or fashion. And finally, a big shout out to the guys over at Anime Y. They just announced that I'm going to be a guest there next weekend. At the time that we're recording this podcast, it's early November, but the weekend after this goes live, when you guys finally hear about this, I'm going to be a guest at Anime Y. I'm going to be hosting panels there, talking about gaming, talking about the industry, talking a little bit about anime, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff related to YouTube and content creation. Hopefully, if you guys are in the South Florida region, you guys will be able to go check it out. It's going to be a lot of fun. But big shout out to all those people that I mentioned. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I would like to give a shout out to everybody on the team, you, Mr. Lugo, for all of the excellent work you've been doing. I want to give a shout out to Dana because she just published her Thor review today. So definitely check that out.
I was just reading it. It's dope.
Yeah, make sure you go see that movie tonight because, you know, everybody's...
Get hype.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I give a shout out to all of the fans that continue to support us. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to have a co-op this weekend, so stay tuned for that. We'll talk more about Paris Games Week, as well as all of the content coming to the site. There's a lot of great things in the works. Some stuff I can't talk about because it's under embargo, but stay tuned. We have a lot of great stuff coming to you guys. But thank you all for the continued support, and we will talk to you all this weekend.
Take care, everybody.